I never imagined that the family I fed, protected, and believed in would be the same people who shattered me with a single cruel sentence that felt like a knife to my soul. I was standing in the middle of my daughter's sparkling Thanksgiving dining room, holding a tray of roasted vegetables that I had spent the entire morning preparing, when everything inside me cracked open like thin glass under too much pressure. My daughter, Lila, was laughing with her brother, Aaron, about some joke I did not hear, and my son-in-law, Drew, was pouring wine with the elegance of someone who always wanted to appear more important than he truly was. My husband, the man I had shared 3 decades of my life with, sat at the head of the table, basking in the attention as if he were the honored guest instead of the person who barely lifted a finger to help me prepare anything. The aroma of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and caramelized pears floated across the room, but none of it warmed me. Instead, I felt the familiar coldness that had crept into my life over the years, the coldness of voices that ignored me, of glances that passed through me like I was nothing more than background noise in a home I helped build. When Drew asked my husband what he was most grateful for, I expected something simple, maybe predictable, maybe even dull, but what came out of his mouth hung in the air like poison. He leaned back, wiped the corner of his lip, and said, "Well, at least I'm not carrying dead weight anymore." His eyes slid toward me. 3 words. 3 casual, knife-sharp words. The room burst into laughter. Even my children laughed. Not loud, but enough. Enough for me to hear it. Enough for me to feel it. Enough for something inside me to fold, to collapse under years of being dismissed, ignored, and used until my identity was little more than a faded outline. I stood there with that tray in my hands, and for one long, agonizing moment, I wondered if I had imagined everything, if I had somehow created this pain, if I had expected too much, if I had stayed too long hoping that love would someday soften the sharp edges of this family. But then, reality hit. They were not laughing with me. They were laughing at me. And the person who should have defended me, stood up for me, told them to stop, or at least looked ashamed, simply smirked like he had finally spoken a truth he had been waiting years to release. I placed the tray on the table, steady but trembling inside, and I realized I did not belong in that room. I realized I had not belonged in that house, in that marriage, or in that hollow version of my life for a very long time. I had spent years telling myself that loyalty was a virtue, that patience was strength, that sacrifice would lead to appreciation someday. But that day had never come. And while everyone continued talking, eating, drinking, pretending nothing cruel had happened, something inside me awakened, something long asleep, something fierce, something exhausted but unbroken. I excused myself quietly, not that anyone noticed, and walked down the hallway toward the small guest room where I had placed my coat. My hands were steady now. My breath was clearer. I did not cry. Not yet. Crying would come later, but not in that house, not in front of people who believed my tears were weakness instead of proof of how hard I had tried to love them. I slipped on my coat, took my purse, and walked out the front door into the sharp chill of late autumn air. The wind brushed against my face like a slap and a blessing at the same time. My car was parked under a street lamp, covered with brittle leaves that had fallen earlier that morning, and as I sat inside it, I let out a long breath that felt like I had been holding it for years. I started the engine, listened to its low hum, and stared at the glowing windows of my daughter's house. Inside those walls, they were probably still laughing, still eating, still pretending they were a perfect family celebrating a perfect holiday. And outside, in the quiet darkness, I felt the strangest mix of pain and clarity settling over me. It was strange how a life could collapse in 1 second and begin in the next. I drove to a small hotel near the airport, the kind with beige walls, modest lamps, and a front desk clerk who never asked too many questions. When I stepped into the room, I finally let myself fall onto the bed and cry, quiet, shaking tears that soaked into the pillow while the air heater rattled rhythmically beside me. I cried for the years I had wasted. I cried for the version of myself I had abandoned. I cried for believing that being a good wife and a good mother meant tolerating disrespect until it became normal. But as the tears dried, something else rose within me, resolve. For the first time in 3 decades, I let myself imagine a different life, one built on my choices, my dreams, my courage. I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope containing the savings my husband did not know I had, and held it in my hands like it was a lifeline. I had planned for this moment subconsciously for years, saving a little here, a little there, always telling myself it was for emergencies. But now I understood the truth. I had been saving myself. I opened my laptop, searched for remote land listings, and stumbled across a breathtaking piece of property tucked deep in the snowy regions of Alaska, far from everything that had ever hurt me, far from the voices that called me useless, far from the people who treated me like a shadow. And in that quiet hotel room, with nothing but the hum of the heater and the throb of my heartbeat, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave that life behind. I would start over. I would find myself again, even if I had to do it in the most remote corner of the world. I was done being invisible. I was done being dead weight. I was done being theirs. The next morning, before the sun rose, I booked a flight, signed the digital offer for the Alaskan property, filed for divorce online, and initiated the paperwork to separate my financial future from the man who had thrown away my worth with a single heartless sentence. I did not look back. Not once. The plane cut through the clouds like a silver blade, carrying me farther and farther from the life I had once begged myself to hold together, and as I stared out the window at the endless stretch of white below, I felt something I had not felt in years: permission to breathe. Alaska unfolded beneath me like a different planet, its mountains rising like ancient guardians and its snow glimmering under the soft gray sky. It looked brutal. Untamed. Merciless. And strangely, exactly what I needed. I stepped off the plane with only 2 suitcases, a folder of legal documents, and the weight of a lifetime sitting somewhere behind my ribs, heavy but loosening with each breath. The air was shockingly crisp, biting at my cheeks as if reminding me that everything from this moment forward would demand strength. Real strength. Not the kind where I stayed quiet to avoid arguments. Not the kind where I shrank myself so others felt big. This was the kind of strength that rebuilt lives. A woman named Jenny was waiting for me at the small regional airport, holding a cardboard sign with my new legal name printed in thick black marker. She was the local real estate agent who had helped finalize my purchase, and she greeted me with the warmth of someone who understood what beginning over truly meant. "It's colder here than most people expect," she said as we walked to her truck, our boots crunching on frost. "But it's honest cold. It tells you the truth right away." I smiled because that line felt carved for me. Honest cold. Honest truth. Something my old life had never given me. The drive to the property took 2 hours, winding along snow-covered roads lined with towering pines and vast stretches of untouched wilderness. When we turned down the narrow path that led to my land, my breath caught. The cabin was small but sturdy, built of dark timber and nestled against the base of a mountain like it had been waiting decades for someone to find it. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign that the caretaker Jenny hired had lit the fireplace earlier, and the warm glow from the windows looked like a promise. A beginning. A heartbeat. I stepped inside and let the heat wash over me. The cabin smelled of pine, cedar, and faint hints of old books, and the moment my boots touched the wooden floor, a strange sense of belonging settled over me. Not comfort. Not safety. But possibility. That night, I sat by the fire with a mug of steaming tea, reviewing the divorce papers I had filed. My husband had not responded yet, but I knew he would eventually, likely with outrage, accusations, and claims that I was making impulsive decisions driven by emotion rather than logic. He would say I misunderstood his joke. He would say the children didn't actually laugh at me. He would say I was overreacting. But I would not listen. Not anymore. The next morning, Jenny returned with a binder full of local regulations, development options, and business proposals. She had a spark in her eyes when she spoke, as if she saw something in me that even I had not fully recognized yet. "This land has potential," she said, spreading documents across the table. "Trails, lodging, wilderness retreats, seasonal tourism. People come here searching for meaning, and you look like someone who knows how to build it." Her words struck so deeply I had to look away for a moment. Build meaning. Hadn't that been my entire life? I just built it for everyone else. Now, it was my turn. We spent hours planning, sketching outlines, identifying contractors, and mapping the land. My vision took shape slowly, like fog lifting over frozen lakes, a women-centered wilderness retreat, a place for healing, reinvention, and courage, the very things I was learning again. Over the next several weeks, I fell into a rhythm. Mornings cutting wood, clearing paths, and walking the trails until my lungs burned. Afternoons spent learning the logistics of running a hospitality business in the middle of Alaska. Evenings filled with journal entries that poured out like therapy sessions, grief, anger, memories, hope. And through all of it, the land felt like it was breaking me apart to build me better. But peace never lasts forever, especially when you have left someone who believes they own you. One cold morning, while the sky was still a pale silver, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from a number I recognized too well. My husband. The man who thought I would never be brave enough to leave. The man who believed I would always crawl back. His message was long, sharp, dripping with entitlement. He demanded explanations. Demanded control. Demanded to know why I had run away like a coward. And then came the part that made my blood turn colder than the wind outside. He threatened to file for legal guardianship, claiming I was emotionally unstable, mentally unfit, and incapable of managing finances or property without him. As if I were a child. As if he could trap me again. As if my entire life belonged to him. I read the message once. Twice. 3 times. And then I closed my eyes and breathed. Not in fear. In resolve. I immediately called Jenny, who put me in contact with a local attorney named Rebecca, a woman with a sharp mind, steady voice, and the kind of quiet fire I recognized in myself. When I explained everything, she did not hesitate. "He is trying to scare you," she said. "But you have power here. More than you realize. He cannot take your autonomy. Not if we fight." And fight we did. For days, we gathered paperwork, financial statements, documentation of my business plans, proof of my competence, and every legal detail needed to dismantle his threat before it could grow teeth. I gathered hotel receipts, flight confirmations, property contracts, tax records, and emails that proved I had been managing household finances for decades while he took credit for everything. I found myself digging through layers of my past, not to relive pain, but to reclaim truth. The truth of who I really was. The truth of the strength I had buried to keep peace with people who never deserved my silence. One night, as I sat by the fire sorting documents into neat stacks, I felt a deep shift inside me. Not fear. Not sadness. But something powerful. Something rising. If he thought he could control me from hundreds of miles away, he had misjudged the woman he married. And if he thought I would crumble in this harsh landscape, he had no idea how much I had already survived. Alaska was not breaking me. It was sharpening me. And every gust of wind outside felt like it was whispering the same truth: you are not done. You are beginning. The morning air bit sharply as I stepped onto the deck, watching the first pale light of dawn stretch across the frozen lake. I could feel the weight of the past 5 years pressing against me, a reminder of every doubt, every sneer, every dismissive word that had once told me I was less than capable. Yet here I stood, the woman who had been called dead weight, finally proving that the heaviest burden she had ever carried had been the opinions of others. Below the lodge, the new greenhouse glimmered in the frost, a testament to the months of planning, the nights spent poring over architectural sketches, and the relentless determination to see beauty and utility coexist. I could hear the faint hum of the generators, powering a complex hospitality operation that now employed 70 people, nearly doubling the workforce I had envisioned in my first tentative plans. Jenny appeared beside me, her scarf whipping around her neck, and offered a wry smile. "It's breathtaking," she said, gesturing to the wilderness beyond. "They won't believe this when they see it on camera." I smiled, thinking about the documentary crew arriving today from National Geographic, ready to capture everything we had built from scratch. It wasn't vanity that motivated me, it was the opportunity to show the world, and more importantly, women like me, what was possible when courage and preparation met opportunity inside the main lodge. Sarah was already coordinating staff and reviewing the shooting schedule with a precision that made me proud in ways that still made my chest ache. She had grown from the girl who had questioned my choices into a partner who could manage budgets, oversee marketing campaigns, and speak confidently about sustainable business practices. We had spent weeks refining every detail, from guest experiences to staff interviews, ensuring that the story we presented was not just about success, but about transformation. I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched as a team of local artisans arranged their traditional craft demonstrations, their hands steady and deliberate, the culmination of decades of skill and years of training. It amazed me that the same community that had once doubted me now celebrated me, embraced me, and trusted me to amplify their work to a global audience. The first helicopter touched down, carrying the crew and their equipment, and the air vibrated with the excitement of possibility. I walked down to greet them, my boots crunching over snow that still held the morning frost, and felt a thrill that was part nervousness, part pride, and part a quiet, satisfied vindication. Margaret, the lead correspondent, introduced herself with a firm handshake and an inquisitive gaze. She had seen our previous feature and wanted to explore the narrative of reinvention, but I suspected she was chasing something deeper. The story of underestimated strength. The cameras were set up on the deck overlooking the lake, the mountains framing a backdrop that seemed almost surreal in its perfection. As I began to speak, I felt the weight of every challenge, every legal threat, every dismissive comment from family, condense into a single moment of clarity. 5 years ago, I was a woman dismissed, belittled, told that my dreams were inconsequential. Today, I stand before you managing a hospitality operation employing 70 people, generating over $12 million annually, and demonstrating that untapped potential can manifest in extraordinary ways. Margaret nodded, her pen poised, capturing the cadence and conviction of my words, and I allowed myself a brief, private smile. I described the logistical feats, the hours spent negotiating with contractors, the nights I stayed awake to refine operations, and the months of strategic planning that transformed a simple wilderness retreat into a model of sustainable tourism. But I did not gloss over the fear, the isolation, or the moments when self-doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. It was essential to show that transformation was not an overnight miracle but a painstaking process of consistent action, careful risk management, and, above all, believing in one's own worth. Margaret asked about my children, and I spoke honestly about the Thanksgiving dinner that had crystallized everything I once endured, the laughter that had stung, the dismissive eyes, and the words that had haunted me for decades. I told her about the gradual journey to reconciliation, how Sarah had come to see my vision and Michael had recognized the strategic intelligence behind every decision I had made. Their presence here, participating in workshops, observing operations, and understanding the ripple effect of my choices on the local economy, was a living testament to what respect and acknowledgement could do. The crew followed us through the lodge, filming guest activities, families learning traditional fishing techniques, photographers capturing the aurora, and couples navigating the trails with local guides. I watched as Jenny instructed a group of teenagers in wildlife photography, her voice steady and encouraging, and I marveled at how our mission had expanded beyond business into education, inspiration, and empowerment. The artisans displayed their crafts, from wood carving to weaving, and the crew captured the intricate movements that spoke to a lineage of skill and dedication. The segment in town highlighted the economic impact, local shops thriving, employment opportunities expanding, and a renewed sense of pride in a community that had once seemed resigned to obscurity. Margaret asked for my reflection on risk, and I explained that leaving behind a predictable life had been terrifying, but the safety of conformity had never equated to fulfillment. The camera focused on my hands as I gestured, and I realized how much these simple movements, once unremarkable household gestures, had become tools of enterprise. Lunch arrived, and for a moment I allowed myself to sit among guests, hearing laughter, seeing curiosity, and noting the sparkle of realization in people who had arrived skeptical and left transformed. Sarah leaned close and whispered that the story we were telling was already inspiring inquiries from women across the country, eager to explore similar ventures in their own towns and communities. By mid-afternoon, the interviews with staff captured their perspectives on empowerment, community, and the pride they felt in contributing to something greater than themselves. We filmed the segment on sustainable operations, showing renewable energy systems. The greenhouse providing fresh produce, and the careful balance of maintaining wilderness integrity while offering modern comforts. As dusk fell, the aurora unfurled its brilliant ribbons across the sky, and I felt the tears welling, not from joy alone, but from the recognition that perseverance, intelligence, and vision had transformed every element of my life. Margaret asked the final, delicate question, "What would you say to women who feel undervalued or dismissed?" I paused, watching the reflection of the lights on the lake, and spoke from the place that had carried me through years of doubt. Trust yourself. Your instincts about your worth are probably correct. If the people around you cannot see it, the problem lies not with your dreams, but with their limitations. Bet on yourself. The world may doubt, but your courage will redefine what is possible. The camera clicked off, but the words lingered in the crisp evening air. We walked to the water's edge, the same place where I had stood years before, alone, terrified, and uncertain. Now, beside me, Sarah smiled knowingly, having inherited not just my eye color, but my resilience, intelligence, and the understanding that transformation requires both vision and action. We reflected on the past, the hardships, and the breakthroughs, realizing that our journey was not just personal triumph but a narrative that could ripple across generations. Jenny joined us, pointing to the lodge behind, now a symbol of collaborative effort, strategic planning, and unyielding persistence. The aurora danced above as we returned inside, lights glowing warmly, and I felt the profound satisfaction of a woman who had spent decades underestimated finally standing fully acknowledged. I thought of my ex-husband, somewhere in Kansas, perhaps reading articles about my success and realizing, belatedly, that his judgment had been fatally narrow. But my focus was not on revenge or resentment, it was on celebration, empowerment, and the future, which held endless possibilities for those bold enough to pursue them. That night, I sat in the great room, surrounded by our guests, artisans, and staff, the fire crackling, aurora glowing above, and I finally allowed myself to feel the immense weight of accomplishment. Every challenge, every doubter, every obstacle had coalesced into something magnificent, a wilderness sanctuary, an economic engine, a community hub, and a beacon for women who needed to see that potential could never be limited by others' assumptions. As the last embers faded and the aurora traced its final ribbons across the sky, I whispered to Sarah, "We've done more than survive. We've thrived. We've shown what's possible when you finally stop carrying the world's expectations and start carrying yourself." Her hand found mine, a silent acknowledgement of the shared journey, and together we looked out over the wilderness, a canvas of light, hope, and extraordinary possibility. Somewhere in that infinite expanse, I knew that women everywhere would see the proof that it was never too late, that courage paired with strategy could defy every expectation, and that the heaviest burdens we carried could be transformed into the foundation of empires. The morning sun reflected off the frozen lake, scattering light across the snow like a million tiny diamonds, and I felt a thrill of anticipation that had nothing to do with the temperature. Today, we were welcoming the first group of women who had reached out after seeing our story, women who had read about our National Geographic feature and had decided that it was time to bet on themselves. Jenny and Sarah were already at the lodge entrance, coordinating schedules, checking equipment, and briefing guides on the day's activities. I walked through the corridors, noting every detail, the polished wood floors, the hand-woven tapestries, the shelves stocked with local crafts, and felt an almost paternal pride for the space we had created. The first van arrived, bringing 4 women from different parts of the country, each with a suitcase, a backpack, and eyes that glimmered with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I greeted them personally, shaking hands, listening to their stories, and feeling the same resonance I had felt when I first stepped onto this land, uncertain but determined. There was Marianne, a 60-year-old who had recently left a marriage that had stifled her creativity, her eyes bright behind round glasses and a wide, tentative smile. Then Claire, 52, a former corporate attorney, still impeccably dressed, whose resignation letter had been the spark she needed to chase the wilderness guide certification she had dreamed of since childhood. Daphne, 48, who had spent decades in retail management and now wanted to open a nonprofit to empower young women through art and entrepreneurship. And Eleanor, 65, whose grandchildren had encouraged her to take a sabbatical from teaching, believing that her culinary talents could flourish in ways she had never dared to imagine. As we gathered in the main hall, I felt a familiar rush, the exhilaration of guiding, teaching, and helping others discover what they were capable of. The same feeling that had driven me to leave Kansas and build this sanctuary. I shared the history of the lodge, our sustainable practices, and the philosophy that guided every decision, emphasizing that authenticity, respect, and diligence were the foundation of success. Jenny led the first activity, a traditional fishing lesson on the frozen lake, demonstrating techniques that had been passed down for generations while incorporating safety and environmental awareness. The women were hesitant at first, their hands clumsy with cold, but by the end of the morning, laughter and triumphant cheers rang across the ice, echoing off the distant mountains. I watched them, recognizing the same awe I had felt when I first caught sight of the northern lights, the same sense of smallness and possibility intertwined. Sarah took them through a photography workshop, teaching composition, patience, and observation, encouraging each woman to capture moments that resonated deeply with her own journey. I moved among the groups, offering encouragement, noticing the transformations already beginning to take shape, the straightening of shoulders, the sparkle in eyes, the hesitant laughter that grew more confident with every success. By lunch, we gathered in the dining hall, serving fresh salmon from the lake and vegetables from our greenhouse, every dish a tangible example of what could be achieved through dedication, planning, and reverence for the land. The women shared stories between bites, confiding in each other, realizing that while their backgrounds were different, the limitations they had endured shared striking similarities. I could hear Marianne whispering to Daphne about the fear she had felt in leaving her marriage, and how it mirrored the terror I had once known when stepping into the wilderness alone. Claire admitted to Eleanor that for years she had told herself that corporate success defined her worth, only to discover that fulfillment required embracing her passions fully. After lunch, we held a workshop on goal setting and strategic planning, showing how to translate dreams into actionable steps, how to measure progress, and how to celebrate even the smallest victories. I noticed the fire in their eyes when I explained that risk was not the enemy, but inaction was far more dangerous, and that each failure was merely a lesson disguised as challenge. Jenny guided them through a crafting session, weaving baskets from local reeds, demonstrating patience, precision, and artistry, lessons in focus, resilience, and humility that applied far beyond the hands-on work. By mid-afternoon, the documentary crew followed each woman through individual experiences, capturing moments of discovery, laughter, struggle, and triumph. I watched as Marianne held her first perfectly woven basket, tears glinting in her eyes, and I remembered the moment I had completed the first log cabin workshop, realizing that tangible achievement healed the soul as much as it built confidence. Claire skied along a gentle trail, falling once, laughing through the pain, and rising again, the crew capturing the moment as a metaphor for persistence and courage. Daphne shared her vision for a nonprofit, and I listened to her articulate every detail, every possible obstacle, and the strategies she would employ, marveling at how clarity and focus could turn dreams into reality. Eleanor cooked alongside our chefs, learning to blend traditional recipes with creative improvisation, discovering that mastery often emerged from curiosity and experimentation rather than rigid adherence to expectation. As evening approached, the women gathered around the fire, sharing stories of past limitation and present possibility, their voices mingling with the crackle of wood and the whisper of wind across the frozen lake. I felt the warmth of connection, the kind that transcended age, geography, and experience, a reminder that empowerment was contagious, and the courage of one could inspire the courage of many. The aurora emerged once more, painting the sky in ribbons of green and violet, and I realized that each of these women, like the lights above, carried brilliance that had always existed, waiting for the right conditions to shine. I shared my own story, not as a boast, but as evidence that transformation was attainable at any stage of life, that late starts, setbacks, and skepticism were merely steps on a path to extraordinary achievement. Marianne, her voice trembling, said that she had always believed she was too old to change, too bound by circumstance to dream, and now she felt something shift within her, a quiet but unstoppable determination. Claire confessed that leaving her career had terrified her, but seeing the lodge, experiencing the workshops, and connecting with women who believed in themselves ignited a fire she had thought long extinguished. Daphne and Eleanor nodded, tears mingling with smiles, acknowledging that the first step toward change was simply to dare, and that the second was to trust in the journey. As night fell, I walked with the women to the water's edge, the aurora reflecting on the frozen surface, creating the illusion that the sky itself had descended to meet the earth. I told them, every one of you has carried weight for decades that was never yours to bear. The courage you summon now to lift yourself will ripple outward, touching not only your lives, but the lives of everyone who witnesses it. They stood silently, absorbing the magnitude of their potential, their faces illuminated by both celestial light and the inner understanding that their stories were just beginning. Jenny and Sarah joined us, their presence a testament to collaboration, trust, and the enduring power of mentorship and partnership. I felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not for myself alone, but for the women around me, for the community we had nurtured, and for the proof that belief, strategy, and persistence could alter the trajectory of lives in profound, unexpected ways. Later, as the women retired to their rooms, I watched the aurora fade, leaving a quiet, starlit sky, and I reflected on the 5-year journey that had brought me from dismissed housewife to founder of a thriving sanctuary, a mentor, and a living example of untapped potential realized. Tonight, I would sleep knowing that we had not only created a business or a retreat but had begun to ignite transformations that would continue long after the cameras left. The whispers of the wilderness carried promises of possibility, and I knew that this chapter, while monumental, was only a beginning. The morning air was crisp, biting at cheeks but invigorating the spirit, and I could feel the energy of anticipation buzzing through the lodge as the new day began. Sarah had already set up the schedule for our second day of workshops, and Jenny was coordinating with guides to ensure every activity would run smoothly, down to the last detail. I walked through the main hall, noting the way sunlight spilled across the polished wood floors, highlighting the intricate carvings and handwoven rugs that told stories of local artisans and their dedication. The women from yesterday were ready, their expressions a mix of nervous excitement and quiet determination, as though they knew today would challenge them in ways they could not yet imagine. Marianne approached me first, her eyes bright with a combination of awe and fear. I can't believe I'm here, she said, gripping my hand. Yesterday, I felt like I could try, but today, I think today I'll really see what I'm capable of. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. That's exactly why you're here. Not to be perfect, but to discover strength you've always had. Claire adjusted her jacket, checking her gear for the guided wilderness hike we had planned. I didn't know I'd be scared of snow, she admitted, but the thought of failing in front of all of you is worse. I laughed softly, recognizing the truth in her words. Fear often disguised itself as perfectionism or hesitation, but it could also be transformed into courage when met head-on. Jenny gathered the women at the lodge entrance, explaining the hiking route, safety protocols, and the lessons hidden in every step: observation, patience, and trust in oneself. The women nodded, absorbing every instruction, while I watched them, noticing subtle shifts: shoulders straighter, eyes sharper, breaths deeper. We began the hike, the crunch of snow beneath boots providing a rhythmic backdrop to conversation and discovery. Daphne trailed slightly behind, speaking softly to Eleanor about the personal transformations they had already begun to recognize within themselves. Yesterday was just a start, Daphne said. I can feel change happening, even if it's invisible to everyone else. Eleanor nodded, her hands clasped over her heart. I've spent so long teaching others to follow rules and routines. Today, I'm learning to follow myself. At the summit, the view unfolded, a vast panorama of untouched forests, frozen lakes, and distant mountains catching the first light of morning. The women paused, each taking in the expanse in silence, allowing the wilderness to speak to them in ways words could not. I gestured toward the horizon, emphasizing the metaphorical as well as the literal heights they had climbed. This is what your courage looks like, I said. Not just the climb, but the willingness to start, the willingness to confront fear, and the willingness to trust yourself along the way. Marianne laughed softly, her voice carrying on the wind. I never imagined I could feel so alive at 60. Claire pulled out her camera, framing the landscape with a reverence that reflected her inner transformation. It's like I'm seeing the world for the first time, she whispered. Jenny and Sarah moved among the group, offering encouragement, guidance, and reminders that the lessons of resilience and strategy were as relevant as the technical skills they were teaching. We began the descent, each step careful but confident, and I noticed the subtle changes, the hesitation replaced by surety, the nervous smiles replaced by quiet pride. Back at the lodge, we prepared for a session in the workshop spaces, where local artisans would teach traditional crafts, blending centuries-old techniques with contemporary creativity. Daphne immediately gravitated toward a loom, her fingers deftly weaving patterns under the guidance of a master artisan. Eleanor experimented with clay, molding shapes with a patience she had never realized she possessed, while Marianne and Claire collaborated on a tapestry, their laughter echoing through the high-ceilinged room. I moved among them, offering suggestions, encouragement, and occasionally, quiet reflection on the lessons these arts held for life: focus, persistence, attention to detail, and pride in creation. By mid-afternoon, the documentary crew captured moments that were raw and genuine, the spark of understanding in eyes, the tremor of uncertainty giving way to mastery, the conversations that revealed personal truths alongside technical achievements. I noticed Marianne wipe a tear from her cheek as she completed her first perfect basket. "This is more than a basket," she said. "It's proof that I can finish what I start, that I can create something meaningful for myself." Claire smiled, adjusting the camera strap. "I've always thought accomplishment had to look like promotion or money. Now I see it can look like this, something I can touch, something I can be proud of." Daphne, holding her finished tapestry, looked at Eleanor and said, "I feel like we've been given permission to be more than what everyone else expected." Eleanor nodded, the clay sculpture in her hands warm and imperfect, yet perfect to her. "And to finally trust that we are capable of more than we believed." As the evening approached, we gathered again around the fire, sharing reflections from the day. Marianne spoke first, her voice steady despite emotion. "I've carried so much fear, so many limits placed by others. Today, I let go. I feel lighter than I have in decades." Claire added, "I realized that confidence isn't about knowing everything. It's about taking the first step and trusting you'll learn along the way." Daphne's words carried a quiet gravity. We've all spent years measuring our worth by other people's standards. Here, I see the value in measuring it for ourselves. Eleanor, her hands still covered in clay residue, whispered, "I've never felt this proud of myself. Not for what I've done for others, but for what I've done for me." Jenny and Sarah joined the circle, offering observations about the growth they had witnessed, affirming that transformation often came quietly, revealed in subtle changes, small victories, and newfound confidence. The aurora began its nightly performance again, streaking the sky in emerald and violet, and I realized that the women around me were reflecting that same luminous transformation, the quiet brilliance that emerged when courage met opportunity. I spoke, my voice carrying warmth and authority. "Every step you take, every challenge you embrace, every fear you confront, is proof that you can redefine your life. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now." The women nodded, tears glistening, hearts pounding with the thrill of recognition and possibility. As the night deepened, they retired to their rooms, many sitting at their windows to watch the northern lights, absorbing the enormity of what they had begun to achieve. I walked to the deck with Sarah and Jenny, the cool air invigorating, the silence broken only by the whisper of wind and distant calls of loons. "I can see it," Marianne's voice carried from below. "I can finally see myself as capable." Claire's laughter followed. "And not just capable, but alive." Daphne added, "We've been given a map to our own potential." Eleanor whispered to no one in particular, and permission to follow it. I looked at Sarah and Jenny, feeling a surge of gratitude for the support and partnership that had made this sanctuary possible. "This is why we built it," I said quietly. "Not for recognition, not for profit, but for moments like these, when someone finally sees their own strength and decides to use it." The aurora shimmered more intensely, as if affirming the truth of my words, and I felt a rare sense of peace, knowing that the impact of this work would ripple far beyond our immediate view. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lessons, and more discoveries, but tonight was a celebration of courage, resilience, and the quiet revolution that began when underestimated people chose to carry themselves first. I stood in the snow, hands tucked in pockets, watching the lights dance across the horizon, and realized that this sanctuary had become a beacon, not only for visitors, but for every woman who had ever been told she was too much, too little, or too late. This was more than a retreat. This was proof that transformation was always possible, that potential never expired, and that true strength often emerged when one refused to be weighed down by others' expectations. And in that moment, with auroras painting the sky and hearts igniting below, I knew that the work we were doing was far larger than any business or structure. It was a movement, a testament, and a legacy. The next morning, the light crept slowly over the mountains, softening the snow and casting the lodge in a golden glow that made even familiar spaces feel new. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the deck, letting the crisp air wake every sense, and for a moment, I allowed myself the rare luxury of just being. No meetings, no schedules, no expectations. Jenny appeared beside me, her cheeks flushed from a brisk walk, a stack of paperwork in her arms that she somehow balanced with effortless grace. "They're ready," she said, nodding toward the group gathered in the main hall. "And today, I think they're ready to push themselves further than they imagined." I took a deep breath, remembering the first time I had walked these trails, trembling with fear and uncertainty, and realized how far both I and these women had come. Sarah joined us, carrying her tablet and a camera, her eyes bright with determination and excitement. "We've mapped a route that combines wilderness survival skills with strategic decision-making exercises," she explained. "It's a challenge, but one that will show them what they're truly capable of." I nodded, feeling a thrill of anticipation. This was the part of the program where transformation often revealed itself most dramatically. When comfort ended and courage began, the women gathered outside, boots crunching in the fresh snow, expressions ranging from anxious to exhilarated. I called them together, looking each directly in the eyes, conveying the seriousness and the potential of the day ahead. "Today," I began, "you'll face tasks that may feel impossible, that may push you beyond what you thought your limits were. But remember, every step, every decision, every misstep is proof of your strength." Marianne swallowed hard, clutching her gloves. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted, voice trembling. Claire's hands tightened around the straps of her backpack. "I'm scared, but I want to try," she said. Daphne smiled softly, a mix of resolve and quiet fear in her eyes. "I think this is what I needed to see, that I can survive, and thrive, outside of expectations." Eleanor nodded, letting the snow settle on her shoulders as if grounding her, giving her the courage to step forward. Jenny handed out compasses, maps, and emergency kits, emphasizing teamwork, problem-solving, and trust, while Sarah explained the scenarios they would encounter along the trail. We started with a series of challenges designed to test focus, patience, and adaptability, navigating a hidden trail, identifying edible plants, and safely crossing a frozen stream. Marianne hesitated at the edge of the ice, her heart hammering. "I can't do this," she whispered. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You can, because you've already done more than you realize. One step at a time, and I'll be right here with you." She took a deep breath, lifted one foot, and placed it cautiously on the ice, then another, until she was across, laughing with relief and disbelief. Claire helped Eleanor with a complicated map-reading exercise, her frustration melting into collaboration as they discovered solutions together. Daphne demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness, improvising shelter from fallen branches and snow, showing that courage wasn't just physical, it was creative and mental. We paused at the halfway point, overlooking a frozen lake that mirrored the mountains above, a perfect reflection of the trials and triumphs unfolding below. I gathered the women in a circle, asking them to reflect on the lessons of the morning. "What did you discover about yourselves?" I asked. Marianne's voice broke slightly. "That fear isn't weakness. It's a compass pointing me to what I need to overcome." Claire added, "That support matters, but the strength has to come from me first. No one else can give it to me." Daphne's tone was quiet but resolute. "That adaptability isn't just for wilderness, it's for life. I can't control everything, but I can control how I respond." Eleanor held up her hands, still muddy from working with clay during an earlier exercise. "And that persistence pays off. Every small effort builds to something meaningful." The afternoon brought more challenges, including a solo navigation exercise where each woman had to chart a course back to the lodge using only natural landmarks and a compass. Marianne's hands shook as she traced the path on her map, but she took deliberate, confident steps, realizing that she could trust her judgment even when it felt uncertain. Claire paused frequently, recalculating routes, adjusting strategies, learning that patience often yielded clearer solutions than panic or haste. Daphne confronted a steep incline, her breath labored, muscles burning, but she pressed onward, discovering the exhilaration of pushing beyond perceived limits. Eleanor stumbled several times, nearly losing balance on icy terrain, but each recovery built her confidence, teaching that resilience was more valuable than perfection. By late afternoon, the group had returned, exhausted but exhilarated, their faces flushed with effort and pride. We gathered by the fire, the heat seeping into tired bones, and I asked them to share their reflections once more. Marianne's voice was steady, filled with newfound strength. I feel empowered. I never thought I could endure this, let alone succeed. Claire nodded, her smile bright and genuine. I've learned to trust myself. And that feels incredible. Daphne's eyes glistened with emotion. I've carried doubt for decades. Today, I released it, even if just a little, and I feel lighter, freer. Eleanor's whisper was firm. I see now that my limits were only imaginary. I can do more than I believed possible. Sarah and Jenny joined in, emphasizing that courage, collaboration, and persistence were transferable skills that extended far beyond these wilderness exercises. I looked at them all, my heart swelling with pride and gratitude. You've each taken steps that will echo through your lives, I said. Not because the mountains demanded it, but because you finally demanded it of yourselves. The aurora appeared again, a stunning green and violet curtain across the night sky, reflecting the transformations within the circle gathered by the fire. I knew these women would carry the lessons of this day home, proof that age, circumstance, or doubt could never define potential, and as they laughed, shared, and embraced one another, I realized that this program was no longer just a retreat. It had become a crucible for courage, a testament to the power of self-belief, and a sanctuary for anyone willing to confront fear and claim their own strength. Jenny pulled me aside, her eyes bright. They're going to remember today for the rest of their lives, she said. I hope so, I replied, watching the group, their shadows flickering against the firelight, their faces radiant with discovery. Sarah approached, her tablet full of photos and video clips from the day. We've captured some incredible moments, she said. Moments that will inspire others when they see them. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity intertwined, proof that transformation, once witnessed, could ripple outward endlessly. We retreated inside, preparing dinner with ingredients sourced from the lodge's greenhouse and local farms, emphasizing the connection between nourishment, sustainability, and well-being. Conversations around the table were animated, filled with laughter, reflection, and shared insights. The women spoke openly about fear, doubt, ambition, and dreams deferred, finding strength in one another's vulnerability. As the night deepened, we stepped back onto the deck, the aurora reflecting in their eyes as they gazed at the wilderness, feeling the enormity of both the environment and their own potential. I realized then that the true measure of success wasn't revenue, bookings, or recognition. It was the quiet, profound impact on hearts and minds, the shifts that began internally and echoed outward in ways visible and invisible. This was the essence of transformation, the confirmation that belief in oneself could rewrite a life, regardless of age, circumstance, or past limitations. I watched the aurora pulse above, the women's laughter carrying on the wind, and knew that this night, like every moment of struggle and triumph, was a testament to the extraordinary power of self-determination. Morning arrived with a hush over the lodge, snowflakes drifting lazily against the backdrop of mountains that seemed impossibly vast and eternal. I stood on the deck, coffee warming my hands, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with the subtle tension of responsibility. Today was different. Today, the women would face the final challenge of their transformation journey, a test designed to mirror the obstacles that had defined their lives and careers. Sarah joined me, her tablet in hand, excitement dancing in her eyes. We've structured it to push them into uncharted territory, she said. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Jenny appeared, carrying supplies for the challenge, her expression calm but determined. They're ready, she said, a statement more certain than any question could have been. I smiled faintly, remembering the hesitations and triumphs of the previous days. How each woman had discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, courage buried under layers of doubt. The women gathered outside, forming a semicircle, faces flushed with cold and excitement. Today, I began, my voice carrying across the frost-laden landscape, you will confront fear, uncertainty, and your own limitations. But also opportunity, resilience, and the capacity you've always possessed. Marianne adjusted her scarf, nerves visible but determination fierce. I'm ready, she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. Claire stood tall, shoulders squared. No more hesitation, she said. I'm claiming my strength. Daphne and Eleanor exchanged glances, silent communication of trust, shared resolve, and readiness to face whatever lay ahead. Jenny handed out the final maps and equipment, explaining that the exercise combined survival skills, leadership decisions, and creative problem-solving under pressure. Sarah guided them through the first stage, which involved navigating through a densely wooded area to locate markers that represented critical life goals. Marianne froze at the edge of the forest. I don't know if I can do this alone, she admitted. I knelt beside her, warmth in my voice. You're never truly alone. Trust the skills you've learned, trust your instincts, and trust your courage. One step at a time. She nodded, inhaled sharply, and stepped forward, her confidence building with each careful footfall. Claire led the group across a frozen creek, calculating each move, instructing others on balance and safety, learning simultaneously to lead and to trust. Daphne confronted a steep incline, muscles straining, breath ragged, but determination shining through. Every step upward was a testament to the strength she had underestimated in herself. Eleanor faced a navigation challenge, compass in hand, recalculating paths repeatedly. She struggled, yet every error became a lesson, every pause a moment of insight. As the group progressed, the environment seemed to respond, snow sparkling like encouragement under the pale sunlight, the wind carrying both challenges and reassurance. By mid-afternoon, they had completed the course, tired but triumphant, each woman glowing with the sense of accomplishment that only comes from confronting true fear. I gathered them in a clearing, the mountains standing like silent witnesses to their triumphs. Look at what you've accomplished, I said. Every step you took, every decision you made, every obstacle you faced, these are proofs of your resilience, courage, and vision. Marianne's eyes shone with tears. I didn't think I could do any of this, she admitted. Claire smiled, voice steady. I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing action despite it. Daphne's hand shook slightly, tears streaming freely. I've spent decades doubting myself. Today, I realized I can trust my own abilities. Eleanor's voice was quiet but firm. And that persistence, patience, and problem-solving are my tools, not just in the wilderness, but in life. Sarah took photos, capturing moments that would serve as both evidence and inspiration for the women and for future participants. Jenny distributed warm drinks and snacks, ensuring everyone had the energy to reflect, recover, and savor the significance of the day. As evening fell, the women circled the fire, flames dancing across faces flushed with triumph, eyes bright with revelation. They shared personal stories, insights, and gratitude, revealing vulnerabilities and strengths in equal measure. I listened, heart swelling with pride, understanding that this program was no longer just about wilderness survival or physical challenges. It was about reclaiming agency, finding voice, and embracing potential that had been ignored, suppressed, or dismissed. The aurora shimmered overhead, vivid greens and purples weaving across the night sky, a silent celebration of the transformations below. Marianne spoke softly, looking at the fire. I never imagined I could feel this alive, this capable. It's like discovering a part of me I didn't know existed. Claire nodded, her smile radiant. I feel unshackled. My doubts, my fears, they're not gone, but they no longer control me. Daphne wiped her tears, her voice steady. For the first time in decades, I feel like I can make choices without apology, without hesitation, without fear of judgment. Eleanor's whisper carried conviction. And I understand now that mistakes aren't failures, they're lessons, proof that I am trying, that I am growing, that I am capable. Sarah joined me quietly, voice low but proud. They're seeing it, Mom. They're realizing what you've been trying to teach for years. Strength comes from within, and it's never too late to claim it. Jenny nodded. And they'll carry it home, to their families, careers, and communities. The impact of today won't fade, it will ripple outward. I took a deep breath, watching the firelight reflect on faces transformed by courage, resilience, and self-discovery. This was the true measure of success, not accolades, not bookings, not press coverage, but the profound, lasting change in human hearts and minds. The women began to share their visions for the future, inspired by what they had accomplished. Marianne spoke of pursuing long-delayed education, finally committing to a degree she had postponed for years. Claire shared plans to start a mentorship program for young women in her city, teaching them decision-making and resilience. Daphne expressed desire to open a studio combining art and wellness, a sanctuary for creativity and self-discovery. Eleanor envisioned a consulting business that emphasized empowerment, collaboration, and problem-solving in corporate environments. I listened, awestruck, realizing that the seeds planted in the wilderness were blooming in ways that reached far beyond the lodge. The aurora pulsed above, green and violet waves sweeping across the sky, mirroring the energy, hope, and transformation igniting below. I sat back, letting the warmth of the fire seep into my bones, heart full of gratitude and satisfaction. These women, like me, had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked, but today they reclaimed themselves. Sarah leaned against me, quiet but beaming. "Mom, they'll never forget this. And neither will we." Jenny added softly, "This is why we do it. Not just for the revenue, not for recognition, but for moments like this, where lids shift, courage is claimed, and possibilities are revealed." The night deepened, cold but alive with possibility, as we stood together watching the aurora dance, a reminder that beauty, strength, and transformation often emerge in the most unexpected places. I knew that tomorrow, and every day after, would bring new challenges, opportunities, and triumphs for these women and for all who would follow this path. But tonight, I allowed myself the rare luxury of witnessing fully, of being present, of celebrating not just the success of the lodge, but the unfolding of human potential. I realized that the greatest achievement of my work was not buildings, revenues, or recognition. It was enabling others to see what was already inside them. And in that moment, under the dancing lights of the aurora, I understood the truth I had always known: strength, courage, and transformation are gifts that multiply when shared. I watched the women laugh, hug, and reflect, each moment a testament to the extraordinary capacity within ordinary lives. I knew that this day, this experience, would ripple outward for decades, touching lives far beyond these mountains, these trails, this lodge. And as I stepped back inside, the fire crackling, the women still buzzing with energy and revelation, I felt a deep, enduring sense of purpose not measured in currency, status, or accolades, but in the transformation of hearts, minds, and the unshakable belief in one's own potential. I realized that for decades I had carried my family, my responsibilities, my doubts, my fears, and now, watching these women claim themselves, I knew that the heaviest burdens, when released, could create the most extraordinary legacies. The morning sun filtered through frost-covered windows, casting long golden rays across the lodge floor, and I felt the familiar pulse of anticipation in my chest. Sarah was already at the main office, poring over emails from prospective guests, partners, and media inquiries, her fingers flying across the tablet as though each keystroke carried the weight of our shared vision. Jenny arrived with breakfast trays, steam rising from hot coffee and oatmeal, the aroma filling the great room with warmth and comfort. I sipped slowly, savoring the quiet before the storm of activity that always came when our operations intersected with publicity. Today, the team from Global Horizons Media would arrive, their mission to film a segment highlighting sustainable tourism and female entrepreneurship in rural economies. I knew the coverage could elevate our lodge to international recognition, but more importantly, it could amplify the message that people underestimated could create something extraordinary. Sarah looked up, eyes sparkling. "They're on schedule. Arrival in 30 minutes. Crew of 12, high-end cameras, and a drone team." I nodded, feeling a thrill mixed with responsibility. This wasn't just about public recognition, it was about legacy, influence, and demonstrating the full weight of what dedication, creativity, and courage could achieve. The women who had completed our wilderness empowerment program were invited to participate, adding authenticity to the story and showing that transformation wasn't just theoretical, it was tangible. Marianne, Claire, Daphne, and Eleanor arrived first, excitement barely contained, nerves tempered by confidence built through the past week's challenges. "Ready to inspire the world?" I asked, smiling. "Absolutely," Marianne said, standing taller than I had ever seen her. "We've lived it, now we get to show it." The media crew pulled up in sleek vans, cameras glinting in the morning sun, and the team of journalists and technicians moved with precision, setting up lighting, sound, and drone positions. I walked them through the lodge, highlighting the geothermal heating system, the solar panels, and the aquaponic greenhouse that supplied fresh produce to the kitchen daily. "This is incredible," the lead producer said, voice low with awe. "The sustainability practices are exactly what our audience needs to see." Sarah guided the crew toward the workshop spaces, where local artisans demonstrated traditional crafts alongside contemporary techniques, showing how economic growth and cultural preservation could coexist. The women's reactions were priceless, their faces lighting up as they realized the tangible impact of their efforts and the community around them. Marianne tried her hand at pottery, Claire practiced weaving under the guidance of a local expert, Daphne learned woodcarving, and Eleanor documented everything in notes and sketches, inspiration evident in every movement. The cameras captured everything, the laughter, the concentration, the small victories that were profound in meaning. During a break, I gathered the women near the lake, the morning sunlight reflecting off the frozen surface in patterns that felt almost ceremonial. "I want you to speak from your hearts," I said. "Don't think about what looks good on camera. Speak about the transformation, the courage, the growth you've experienced here." Marianne stepped forward first, voice steady. "I came here burdened by self-doubt and fear of failure. Now, I know that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, you discover it in the wilderness, in community, and in yourself." Claire continued. "I learned that action, not perfection, defines courage. Every decision I make now carries the weight of experience and the clarity of confidence I never had before." Daphne's voice cracked, tears brimming. "I've carried expectations that weren't mine, shame that wasn't deserved. Here, I reclaimed my life, my voice, my vision." Eleanor added quietly but firmly, "And I understand that leadership, empathy, and persistence are not qualities reserved for the privileged. They belong to anyone willing to face fear and rise." The producer nodded, eyes glistening. "This is exactly what we hoped to capture. The authenticity, the impact, it's remarkable." We moved to the dining hall, where guests were preparing traditional meals, and the crew captured interviews with chefs, gardeners, and local suppliers who explained how our lodge's model had revitalized the economy and created meaningful employment. Michael, a young economist from the region, explained the ripple effect of employing 30 people full-time and 75 seasonal staff. "This lodge doesn't just generate revenue," he said. "It sustains livelihoods, preserves culture, and inspires communities." I stood back, observing, as Sarah guided the women through storytelling exercises for the cameras, encouraging them to articulate their transformations and the lessons they had learned. Jenny coordinated guest participation in wildlife photography workshops, teaching them to see beauty in the unnoticed details, capturing moments that mirrored the personal transformations happening simultaneously. The drone captured sweeping aerial shots, the wilderness stretching endlessly, a visual metaphor for the limitless potential that unfolded when underestimated people dared to pursue their vision. Lunch was served in the main lodge, locally sourced ingredients prepared with precision and care, each bite a reminder that success required attention to detail and dedication to quality. During the meal, I watched Marianne, Claire, Daphne, and Eleanor share insights, laughter, and reflections on their journeys. Their bonds, formed through challenge and triumph, were palpable, uniting them in shared understanding and empowerment. Sarah and I stepped outside briefly, the wind biting but invigorating. "Mom," she said, voice low, "look at them. They're carrying forward what you built here. The lodge, the programs, the principles, it's living, breathing, expanding." "I see it," I replied, chest tight with emotion. "And it's bigger than any one of us. Bigger than the lodge, bigger than recognition. It's about lives changed, potential realized, courage claimed." The filming continued into the late afternoon, capturing workshops, forest expeditions, and intimate interviews. By evening, the women gathered around a fire, faces glowing with warmth, not just from the flames but from a deep understanding of what they had accomplished. The producer leaned close to me, voice soft. "You've created more than a lodge. This is a movement, a proof that transformation is possible at any stage of life." I nodded, heart swelling. It started with believing in overlooked potential, in underestimated individuals, in the power of perseverance and vision. And it continues with every woman, every guest, every story shared. The aurora began its nightly dance above, green and violet lights weaving across the sky, a silent applause for the day's achievements. The women hugged, laughed, and reflected, their faces illuminated by firelight and recognition of their own courage. Marianne whispered, "I'll never forget this week. It's changed me, forever." Claire added, "I feel unstoppable, finally free to pursue the life I've imagined." Daphne's eyes glistened with tears. "I understand now that claiming your own life is not selfish, it's essential." Eleanor's voice, steady and resolute, concluded, "And I will carry these lessons, this strength, into everything I do from now on." Sarah and I exchanged a look, silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary progress made, the lives touched, and the legacy that was expanding far beyond the lodge. As the night deepened, the aurora flared in brilliance, a vivid reminder that beauty, strength, and transformation often emerge when courage meets opportunity. And I understood, more clearly than ever, that the greatest achievements were not measured in revenue or recognition, but in the empowerment, growth, and reclamation of life by those who had been underestimated. Tonight, the lodge was alive not just with lights and warmth, but with possibility, courage, and hope. And tomorrow, the journey would continue, for us, for our guests, for every woman and man inspired to rise above expectation, fear, and limitation. The morning arrived crisp and clear, the frozen lake reflecting a sky of pale blue and gold as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. I stood at the edge of the dock, scarf pulled tight, breath forming clouds in the air, and felt the familiar thrill of possibility humming through my veins. Sarah appeared beside me, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, eyes scanning the horizon with the mix of determination and wonder I had learned to recognize instantly. "Mom," she said softly, "they're on their way. The White House delegation, economists, and sustainability experts. It's all happening today." I nodded, heart tightening. The invitation had come as a surprise, an acknowledgement that our work here was not only significant but exemplary on a national scale. For decades, I had been told my ideas were frivolous, my ambitions secondary, my instincts irrelevant. Now, the world wanted to see the result of those decades, the culmination of risk, perseverance, and belief in the untapped potential of underestimated people. The convoy of black SUVs wound up the paved road, engines humming with quiet authority, and the security team ushered dignitaries and experts through the main entrance with practiced precision. Inside, I could feel the weight of history settling over the lodge, the intersection of personal triumph and public recognition, of individual resilience meeting systemic validation. Sarah guided the group through our main operational spaces, highlighting workshops, the aquaponic greenhouse, and the library filled with first editions and local history that framed the cultural context of our work. "Every element here is intentional," I said to the delegation, smiling. "The environment we create is not just for guests, it's for learning, reflection, and transformation." The delegation nodded, taking notes, asking questions about staff management, economic impact, and sustainable practices. I could see subtle expressions of astonishment as they realized that a former housewife, dismissed for decades, had not only survived but had built an ecosystem of empowerment and economic revitalization. One of the experts, a woman from a prominent economic development agency, leaned forward. "You've managed to integrate business acumen with social responsibility in a way rarely seen. How did you conceptualize this?" I paused, reflecting on the years of quiet observation, problem-solving, and improvisation that had prepared me for this very moment. It began with understanding limitations, not mine, but the ones imposed on me. I realized the world measured me against a framework I did not create, and I chose to create my own framework instead. Sarah added, "And she built a community around it. This isn't just a business, it's a living model for economic and social impact." They toured the guest accommodations, the commercial kitchen where signature meals were prepared daily, and the spaces where workshops allowed visitors to engage with local culture firsthand. Everywhere we went, the team took meticulous notes, recording the layout, the procedures, the balance between efficiency and authenticity. During lunch, I watched as my children interacted with the delegation, Michael discussing financial projections and employment statistics, Sarah presenting marketing strategies, and Jenny explaining operational logistics. The delegation seemed to notice the seamless collaboration, the shared respect among team members, and the evident pride in what had been built from nothing but vision and determination. After lunch, we moved outdoors to the lakeside amphitheater, where local artists were preparing to demonstrate traditional music and dance, blending heritage with innovation in a living, breathing tableau of cultured. I stood behind the group, observing, and allowed myself a quiet moment to reflect. 5 years ago, I had arrived here with nothing but determination and a few boxes of personal belongings. Today, the lodge employed over 100 full-time and seasonal staff, generated annual revenue exceeding $12 million, and had become a hub of inspiration, learning, and empowerment for women, families, and communities. The delegation's eyes widened as performers began, the rhythm of drums, the sweep of violins, the voice of the local singer filling the crisp air with an energy that could not be replicated in a studio. Sarah leaned close. "They're seeing it now, Mom. They're seeing what we've always known." I nodded, chest tight with emotion, thinking of the countless times I had been underestimated, dismissed, or ignored. This recognition wasn't just personal, it was a statement about what overlooked potential could achieve when given space, trust, and opportunity. After the performance, the group settled around a fire pit where marshmallows and hot chocolate awaited, and I encouraged them to speak with guests and staff about their experiences. The young woman from the delegation, perhaps no older than 28, approached me quietly. "I've spent years in corporate environments, feeling like my ideas didn't matter. Watching this, I realize it's not my ideas that are the problem, it's the environment I was in." I smiled, the familiar thrill of mentorship and inspiration washing over me. Change your environment, or create one. That's where possibility begins. Sarah facilitated a roundtable discussion, asking each member of the delegation to reflect on what they observed and how it could be applied to other communities. The insights were profound, blending economics, sustainability, and human psychology into actionable strategies, each point reinforcing the idea that empowerment and economic development were not mutually exclusive. During a break, I walked along the edge of the lake, aurora like ribbons of cloud reflecting the sun, thinking about the journey that had led here. I recalled Thanksgiving dinners filled with ridicule, Christmas mornings shadowed by manipulation, and the countless moments of self-doubt that had almost stopped me from pursuing my vision. But here, in the wilderness, surrounded by evidence of what perseverance, clarity, and courage could accomplish, regret felt almost irrelevant. It was replaced by gratitude, for the lessons, for the community, for the opportunity to demonstrate the power of belief in oneself. The delegation reassembled in the lodge for closing remarks, and I spoke plainly, without scripts, without rehearsal, words flowing from the core of lived experience. Every person in this room, every viewer who will see this story, needs to understand that undervaluation is not failure. Dismissal is not truth. Your potential exists whether the world acknowledges it or not. Eyes met mine with the intensity of recognition, understanding, and sometimes disbelief. Empowerment begins with choice. With courage. With the willingness to claim the space you deserve. And when one person does it, they create ripples, through families, communities, economies, and generations. Sarah joined me, linking arms in solidarity, her presence a testament to the enduring power of mentorship, partnership, and familial reconciliation. As the sun dipped low, painting the lake in hues of amber and rose, cameras captured the final shots, the light reflecting in the eyes of all who had witnessed the day's events. The delegation departed with firm handshakes, smiles, and the promise to incorporate these lessons into national programs for women's empowerment and rural development. Once the last SUV disappeared down the road, I exhaled deeply, feeling the enormity of what had just transpired. The lodge, once a refuge, was now a beacon, a tangible demonstration of what courage, vision, and relentless effort could achieve. Sarah turned to me, voice quiet but filled with meaning. "Mom, they get it. We've made them see what's possible when underestimated people refuse to stay small." I nodded, heart swelling, and glanced across the frozen lake, where reflections of mountains and sky mirrored the limitless potential within human ambition. Jenny appeared with warm cider, and we sat together on the dock, the quiet stretching around us like a benediction. I never thought I'd see the day when recognition like this wouldn't feel like luck but like earned truth, I said, sipping slowly. Sarah smiled, eyes bright. It's truth, Mom. All of it. You've earned every moment. As twilight settled, the first stars piercing the sky, I realized that the journey was ongoing. The lodge, our community, the programs, the lives transformed, they were all evidence that courage, persistence, and self-belief create ripples beyond comprehension, and for the first time in decades, I felt entirely at peace with the weight I had carried and the life I had claimed as my own. Tonight, the wilderness was alive, not with solitude, but with the promise that the underestimated could rise, create, and inspire. Tomorrow would bring challenges, opportunities, and decisions, but for now, I simply watched the lake, the mountains, the sky, and knew that every step, every risk, every choice had led to this luminous, undeniable reality. I woke before dawn, the sky already hinting at shades of rose and gold, the frozen lake reflecting the promise of a new day. Sarah joined me silently, coffee in hand, her eyes alive with anticipation and the unspoken understanding that today was more than another workday. It was the culmination of everything we had built, of every risk, every sleepless night, every doubt we had faced and overcome. Mom, Sarah said quietly, I've been thinking. The story we tell today, it's not just ours. It belongs to everyone who's ever been dismissed, undervalued, or overlooked. I nodded, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest, the surge of emotion that always came when recognition and purpose intersected. The news crew had arrived early, setting up cameras across the lodge, the dock, the workshop spaces, and the greenhouse, capturing the essence of Northern Lights Sanctuary from every angle. This was the moment I had dreamed of but never dared imagine. The chance to share our journey not just as a tale of personal triumph, but as a blueprint for transformation and empowerment. As the cameras rolled, I spoke with a calm intensity, my voice carrying the weight of lived experience. 5 years ago, I was considered dead weight. Dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked by the people closest to me. Tonight, you will see that what they failed to recognize was not weakness but the potential for extraordinary resilience. Sarah added, and you will see how support, belief, and opportunity can transform not only individuals but communities, economies, and even cultural perceptions about what is possible at any stage of life. The filming captured our guests engaging in workshops, local artists demonstrating traditional crafts, children learning to fish sustainably, and women discovering the courage to attempt things they had long considered impossible. I watched, heart swelling, as one woman, perhaps in her late 50s, guided her granddaughter through the greenhouse, explaining how the aquaponic systems worked while tears shone in her eyes. It was a living testament to the ripple effect of empowerment, the proof that investing in oneself created value far beyond personal success. Later, seated before the cameras for the main interview, I allowed myself vulnerability, something I had resisted in earlier documentaries. People often ask if I feel regret for all the years I spent apologizing for existing, for taking up space, for daring to dream. I said, voice steady but raw with truth. The truth is, I do regret those years. But I also recognize that every step, every setback, and every moment of doubt prepared me for this. Life does not wait for permission, it waits for courage. Sarah leaned in, hand resting lightly on mine. And for action. Courage is only meaningful when paired with decisive steps toward your goals. The film crew asked questions I had expected, about operational challenges, managing staff, sustaining a growing enterprise in a remote environment, but they also asked questions that cut deeper, about identity, about self-worth, about the courage to confront societal and familial limitations. I spoke honestly, reflecting on the years of dismissal, the threats, the court battles, and the whispers of those who doubted me. I learned that undervaluation is not a reflection of your potential. It is a reflection of other people's limitations. If you want to create, lead, and transform, you must first claim your own space and refuse to allow anyone else's disbelief to dictate your life. Sarah presented the impact of our work on the local economy, showing data in real terms. Employment had increased from 25% to 63% of the county's workforce. Annual revenue had reached over $12 million. Sustainable tourism programs were being studied nationally and internationally, but numbers alone cannot capture what we have achieved, I said, pointing to guests learning, laughing, struggling, and discovering themselves along the lakefront and in the workshops. The real measure of success is the lives touched, the confidence ignited, and the inspiration shared. That is the legacy we create when we act boldly and authentically. During the filming, the crew arranged a live video call with women across the country who had been following our story. A woman in her 60s, who had left a stifling marriage to open a small art studio, spoke with tears in her eyes. Watching you, I finally believe that it is not too late for me. That my ideas, my dreams, and my worth matter even after decades of being told otherwise. Another woman, a former corporate attorney, shared that she had quit her high-pressure job to train as a wilderness guide. I always thought I had to wait for permission. Now I see that permission is irrelevant. The choice is mine, and I am capable. These stories, these voices, reverberated through the lodge, through the cameras, and eventually through homes, offices, and hearts across the nation. I realized then that our work was no longer confined to the wilderness, the lodge, or even Alaska. It had become a movement. Sarah and I spoke quietly after the call, watching the aurora-like clouds shift across the morning sky. I never imagined that what began as an escape would become a catalyst for change, I said. I ran toward a life that fit the woman I was meant to be, and in doing so, others have been inspired to do the same. Sarah smiled. You didn't just change your life, Mom. You changed how the world sees potential, capability, and the value of underestimated people. The day continued with filming of guest interactions, interviews with staff, and conversations with local leaders who acknowledged how Northern Lights Sanctuary had revitalized the community. Every smile, every handshake, every shared lesson reinforced the reality that the most extraordinary results often arise from the courage to defy expectations and pursue vision relentlessly. As the crew packed their equipment, I stood on the deck, hands resting lightly on the railing, and felt the profound satisfaction that comes from knowing you have lived authentically and purposefully. Sarah joined me, and together we watched the sun dip toward the horizon, painting the lake in hues that felt both familiar and newly precious. The lesson here, I said, voice gentle but firm, is that no one can define your potential but you. No one can dictate your worth but you. And the most powerful transformation occurs when you decide to stop carrying the weight of everyone else's limitations and start lifting yourself. Sarah nodded. It's also about paying it forward. Helping others see their own power once you recognize yours. I looked toward the distant mountains, knowing that our journey was ongoing, that growth, learning, and impact never truly end. But for now, I allowed myself to simply breathe, to savor the accomplishment, the recognition, and the clarity that comes from aligning purpose with action. The lodge glowed behind us, a beacon of possibility and resilience, and I knew that every woman who watched, every family inspired, and every community touched would carry a piece of this story forward. Turning to the camera one final time, I spoke directly to viewers everywhere. Believe in yourself. Trust your instincts. Create spaces where your talents matter, where your contributions are seen, and where your dreams can flourish. The world will notice when you stop apologizing for existing and start investing in your own life. And remember, Sarah added, voice full of conviction, it is never too late to start, to change, or to build something extraordinary. You don't need permission, only courage and action. I smiled, thinking of the women, men, and families who might watch this story and finally take the steps they had long delayed. If you've been inspired by this journey, I said, subscribe to this channel, share your story, and take your first step today. Because every act of belief in yourself creates ripples far beyond what you can imagine. The aurora painted the sky one final time as the cameras turned off, leaving Sarah and me alone on the deck. I felt the profound peace that comes from alignment, from having proven that underestimated people, when given the chance, can create empires of influence, empowerment, and transformation. Jenny joined us, warm smile, eyes reflecting pride and shared accomplishment. We did it. All of us, together. I nodded, heart full. Yes, Jenny. And this is only the beginning. There are more lives to touch, more communities to inspire, and more potential to unlock. The night settled around us, the wilderness alive with quiet celebration, and I realized that for every person who had doubted me, for every obstacle, every dismissal, I had built not just a lodge, but a legacy, and in that legacy, I found my ultimate truth. The heaviest weight I had ever carried was never the expectations of others, it was the unclaimed potential within myself. Now, I was free. Now, we all were free, and the world would see what happens when someone who was once called dead weight finally decides to rise, build, and lead.